Hi everyone! Welcome to another episode of So Not Scary. In today's episode, we are going to look at how to use a die cutter. So earlier on in one of my videos, I had used a die cutter and one of my lovely viewers had commented, well, how do you use it? Please show it to me. So I thought this will be a great way to show you what a die cutter is and how do we use it specifically when it comes to sewing projects. So let's go ahead and get started. So of course, the very first question is, what is a die cutter? So for those of you who are not familiar with die cutting, basically die cutting is a process in which you use dies to cut low strength materials. What are dies? Dies are basically just like cookie cutters. You know how cookie cutters have a specific shape and you use it to cut soft Play-Doh or play clay? Exactly like that, dies are like cookie cutters, only they're very, very shallow, and we use them to cut soft or low strength materials. These materials can be paper, cardboard, foil, fiber, cloth, felt, all sorts really. But today specifically, we are going to discuss die cutters when it comes to cutting fibers or fabric or cloth. So let's get into it. So when entering into the world of die cutting as a crafter, it is important to know what different types of die cutting machines are out there. So broadly speaking, you can split up die cutting machines into three categories. Category number one is manual die cutting machines, such as this one, because it does not use any electricity and you have to use your hand and your energy to crank it. Okay, so this is manual. The second category is electrical, where they are connected to electricity, but they just perform a simple function, for example, just a rolling function. So here in the manual, I'm using my hand to roll it, but in an electrical machine, the electricity's power is going to roll the machine. And the third category of die cutters is electronic die cutters, which have got a built-in computer. So they are far more sophisticated than electrical machines because they've got built-in scanners, they've got their own memory, you can design things using them. Okay, so that's an entirely different type of die cutter altogether. Today, however, specifically, we are going to learn how to use a manual die cutter for cutting up fabrics for sewing. Let's get started. So this is my manual die cutter, and you have seen it in a number of earlier videos, like you can see here and maybe here as well. And this one is called Cuttlebug, as you can see here. And this design is no longer produced, it's now obsolete. I had bought it secondhand on eBay at a much lower price compared to if you would buy it new, okay? But this is called a Cuttlebug. And the main advantage of using a die cutter is that it saves you time in cutting. So for me personally, one of the biggest things that takes up the most time if I'm trying to create any sewing projects is cutting, because cutting can often be a very fiddly business. It can be time consuming and you're not really sewing when you're cutting, are you? So for me, a die cutting machine means that I can cut down on your time. Which brings us to today's question. What is the one thing that takes up time when you are sitting down to sew? Comment down below and let me know. So let's talk about the parts of a manual die cutter. So the great thing about this old Cuttlebug is that it comes in a compact design. Right now, it is not laid out as it should be in order to cut. It's actually folded up. So in order to set up my Cuttlebug, what I have to do is open it up. There we go. And as I open it up, this is quite a heavy little machine. It's about 3 kilos, I think. What it does is it's got suction pads underneath it. And when I open it up, those suction pads cling onto my table and it's not going to move anywhere easily, okay? So this is our cutting platform. We do need certain other parts in order to make it work. Let me show you what they are. So here in my hand, I've got these sets of plastic sheets. Okay, they're fairly thick and they vary in thickness, and these are called cutting plates. Now with Cuttlebug, these cutting plates are labeled as A, B, C. For example, I've got 2 B plates, and they've got quite a few cuts on their surfaces, you can see, because they've been used quite a bit. This is a generic plate that I bought off of eBay because my own plate broke. I think this is plate C or A, one of the two. And then this is the thickest plate for the Cuttlebug. And I've had this as part of my machine. It came with the second-hand machine. Every manual die cutter, however, comes with its own type of cutting plates. So if you've got a different brand of die cutter, for example, Gemini or Big Shot or whatever is out there, you will have your own specific cutting plate to go with that machine, okay? Now, along with the cutting plates, you need to make sure that your die cutter has got something called the handle. And this is basically what helps us roll the cutting plates through the machine. So if I stick my hand through here, you will see that it comes through here. And inside here, there are rollers, okay? And when I turn this, those rollers slide the cutting plates through the machine, putting pressure on them to cut whatever it is that we want to cut. And finally, the most essential part of a manual die cutter is the cutting dies themselves. And cutting dies, like I said, look like very shallow cookie cutters. I've got 2 folders full of cutting dies that I have accumulated over the years, okay? Not all of them are branded for Cuttlebug. Most of them, in fact, I bought off of eBay, and they were imported from China, I think, and they were really, really cheap. And I like to keep them in this little wallet folder thingy bob. And if I open it up, you can see my collection. And I've labeled them. Look, here it says flowers and leaves. I've got gift tags, dinosaurs. That's when my girls were obsessed with dinosaurs a couple years ago. Stars. Okay, all sorts. Hearts, circles, numbers, nautical, Christmas cards, miscellaneous bugs, ovals, alphabet. Okay, those are my categories, but I do have more cutting dies, so I think I have a bit of a cutting die collection problem. But really quickly, let me show you what these look like. So let's take out these oval dies. Because most cutting dies are made out of metal, sellers will often send them to you on a flexible magnetic sheet so that you can just store them without them moving all over the place. So if I do that, they're not going to fall off because it's magnetic and it's sticking to the metal. So here are these oval dies, and I think they are called thin lit dies because they're probably so thin. So let me just show you how thin it is. Do you see how thin that is? It's like hardly a couple millimeters thick, okay? And yet there's a ridge, and that ridge is what cuts out the material. Now these thin lit dies are designed particularly for cutting paper and cardstock for card making. However, I like to use them for cutting fabric and felt. And the great thing is that even though they were so cheap, I bought them off of eBay, and like I said, they were imported from China, so they were really, really cheap. They give you so much variety of sizes. So any projects you want to make, you can simply choose what size you want. So I've got this ginormous die that I could use with my die cutter. And I've got this tiny little die, okay? And all these sizes in between, okay? So those are what cutting dies look like. So now that we've seen all the different parts of a die cutting machine, let's move on to how to cut fabric using a die cutter. But before we move ahead, if this is all making sense and if you're finding this valuable, hit that like button so that I know that this does make sense to you guys. And if you haven't done so already, consider subscribing because here we talk all about beginner sewing. Let's move on. So whenever you want to cut a soft material with your die cutter is going to come with specific instructions of what kind of cutting plates to use or the die that you're cutting. So for example, for my Cuttlebug, if I want to cut a piece of felt, I'm going to use this really thick white plate. So that's going to be my first layer. Then I'm going to use a slightly thinner plate, but it's still quite fat. That's going to be my second layer, okay? And finally, I'm going to use one last plate, which is a plate B for my Cuttlebug, and that's going to be my third layer. And together, these will make the perfect thickness of cutting sandwich for my machine. Whichever machine you choose to use, it's going to have its own different combination of cutting plates. So keep that in mind whenever you're thinking of buying a manual die cutter. Sometimes, however, you might find that your cutting material is either too poofy or too flimsy or maybe too thin Whatever reason it might be, sometimes perhaps the die might not penetrate the fabric all the way through, and it might not cut it all the way through. In instances like these, what you will need additionally is something called shims. Shims really are really thin layers of anything. It could be a card, it could be paper, it could be a sheet of plastic, anything to give your cutting sandwich, which is this, slightly more depth, so it can put more pressure on your cutting project. So I'm just going to use these pieces of scrap paper. I've cut them up into smaller pieces to be able to run them through my machine, and these will act as shims for me in case my machine does not cut effectively through the fabric that I'm trying to cut. So we've done quite a bit of looking into manual die cutters. Let's go ahead and cut something now. So here's my 3 layers that I just showed you, and here is a piece of cheap red felt, and I'm gonna attempt to cut this for you guys today. So I'm going to layer my plates the way I showed you earlier. In fact, because this plate has got more cutting lines compared to this plate, can you see? And I want to keep this plate relatively clean, I'm probably going to layer my messy plate in the middle. Okay, so that's 2 plates. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to layer my shim, because I know these are old bendy plates, so I know my die cutter struggles sometimes. So here's my shim. I'm putting a piece of paper down there. That's my piece of felt, and today I'm going to demonstrate to you using this smallest oval. So I'm just going to put it there, just to reduce wastage of my material. And there is my cutting sandwich complete. Let's run it through our machine. So our Cuttlebug is all set up. Here's the sandwich that I just showed you with the paper shim, and I'm just gonna put it here. Okay, and I'm gonna start rolling, and as I roll, if you listen carefully, you will hear the crunching and cutting noise that my Cuttlebug makes. Okay, the bulk of it has gone through. Now, just to be extra sure that it has got through my material, I will reverse roll it. There. Let's see how it did. I'm going to take it out, slide my plate off, and slide my project off. The paper. There's the oval. Look how perfect it is. It's absolutely perfect, okay? And that's how you die cut any fabric or soft material with a manual die cutter. Now, let's say you wanted to cut out some letters accurately and quickly. Maybe it's someone's birthday, you want to make a birthday banner or a birthday card, or you want to do some applique on a pretty top. How do you do that? It's the exact same thing. Here I've got a thin lit alphabet die, okay, and this is the letter H, okay. The exact same thing. I've got 2 layers of cutting plates here. I'm going to put my paper shim under, okay, and here's my fabric. Put it down. Here's my letter, and those are the blades, so we always turn the blades towards the fabric. And I can just save space by placing it like that, so that all of that material is not wasted, and I can use that for something else. On comes my 3rd plate, and we just roll the sandwich through. Let's have a look. Look at that, perfect. Okay, it doesn't get any more perfect or accurate than that. And you could cut literally anything. The only limits are the limits of the dies that you've got and how you choose to use them in combination with one another. So you might be thinking, well, it's all well and good cutting out these cute letters and these cute shapes out of a die cutter, but what's the point? Why should we cut out all these little bits anyway? It's not really like clothes, or it's not something useful. Well, there's an entire industry of handicrafts which is dependent upon die cut fabrics and die cut felt, die cut materials. So I'm just going to give you an example of some projects that I've made using the help of my die cutting machine, obviously along with hand cutting and sewing. A few months ago I started work on a quiet book, and I have used my manual die cutter extensively to help me with this project. Let me show you. So this is just one page of my quiet book, which is still unfinished, as you can see, but every single one of these shapes has been die cut. So this is a star. Okay, so it's for little kids, so you basically just stick it back on again, and here as well. Okay, so even the HTV that you see on the back, that was cut out using my die cutting machine. Okay, then circle was cut out using a die cutter, as well as the square. I've got dies for all of these. Okay, and once again, these were super cheap dies, like I bought them on eBay from China. So not only was the felt, which is a fabric, cut out using a die cutter, but all the HDV shapes that you see here, which I then heat pressed on, they were cut out using my die cutter. Here's another example, and here it's like rows for a rocket ship, so that's the quiet book page. But this is a multi-layered die cutting project. So the letter R was cut out using my manual die cutter along with the circle, and then after sewing I used my pinking shears to create this nice edge. And here's another interesting example of the inlay. So as you open the rocket ship, you can see an alien, but look at the door of that rocket. Do you see this? This window for our vinyl sheet was created using the exact same die that I just showed you. So if I put it there, look, it's a perfect fit. So I used my oval die to cut out this window in the rocket shape so the alien can say, hey. And here are some more examples of how you can use die cutters to cut out different shapes. Again, all the circles and layered HTV was done using a die cutter. Here with the little mouse's eyes, I used my die cutting eyelet machine to cut out tiny little circles. And obviously all of these pages will combine together to form a quiet book, and quiet books sell for a lot of money online. You're talking about hundreds of pounds for a good quiet book. So something like this, if you were to create this with 10 pages, you could easily charge over £100 for this on online shops. So that was all about how to use a die cutter or a manual die cutter to cut up fabric and felt, as well as paper and card, but that's a whole different world in itself. I hope you enjoyed this video and it gave you some ideas on what possibilities there are out there when it comes to sewing. It's not always clothes, it's not always garments, it's cute little simple things that you can create and actually build up a craft business using a die cutting machine if you are interested. You don't have to go out and buy a new machine. Like I said, I bought my machine as a bundle secondhand on eBay, and the lady was very kind. She actually gave me all the cutting plates with this. Along with that, she had some other stuff like embossing folders, some other dies specific to the Cuttlebug that she sent me. I don't really use those dies because they were specific to card making, and I don't do much card making. But for these purposes, for cutting fabric, they are fabulous. Okay, so if you want to invest in a manual die cutter, I don't think electrical or electronic die cutters are necessary when you're just starting out into the world of die cutting. But if you are starting out and thinking about investing in a die cutter, definitely check out Amazon and eBay. Because on eBay, people sell so many secondhand things all the time. And this one's been with me for, oh gosh, it's going on 9 years now. And it's just working beautifully. I'm very happy with it. I wouldn't exchange it for anything else. If you do want to learn more about electronic die cutters, however, do let me know, comment down below, because I do have a wonderful electronic die cutting machine as well that I do use to create some wonderful projects, such as this one, which I just finished last week, to customize my daughter's winter coats this year. And it's almost like tradition. I do that every 2 years, and I get them a new, because every 2 years they shoot up so they have to change their winter parkas, and I do like to customize them, and it gives the garment that little, that extra little thing that they love wearing to school, and it just makes them smile every time they put it on. So these are the kind of things you can do with a manual die cutter. Let me know what else you would like me to share with you, talk about, discuss possibilities, hopefully of turning a little sewing craft into a business as well in the future. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Share this video if you think someone else might benefit from it, and I shall see you guys soon. Bye!